Hello everyone, I hope you are having a wonderful day, no matter where you are and which hour it is in your place. Today we are hosting a webinar which is provided by Work Package 16 Innovation from the Graphene Flagship. Our today's guest that will present the webinar is Dr. Zina Cinker. Welcome.
Thank you, Alexandra.
Yes. Just so you know, a couple of information before we start. You are all muted right now, and it will stay like that until the end of Zina's presentation. You can still post your questions during the webinar just using the chat function. And I will read your questions after the presentation has ended. We will have a Q&A session after the presentation, so I will unmute you all then, and you'll also be able to ask questions live after the webinar. Also, a short information for everybody. This webinar is recorded, so if some of your friends couldn't make it today and couldn't join us today, or you would like to review the presentation afterwards, it will be available on the educational platform also provided by the Graphene Flagship. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. And right now, please, Zina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexandra. Well, first of all, I wanted to start by thanking Graphene Flagship for inviting me to give this webinar. And also many thanks to Alexandra and Camilla for facilitating this. And also many thanks to all of you who have been very patient and also for your well-being wishes. Well, I wasn't quite feeling so well for a few days out there, but to be honest, I was really lucky because I recovered quite quickly. And although I did go through those familiar stages of feeling like I was getting better and then it just would hit again. It's been 20 days, so I feel much, much better. And I really thank you. I'm very excited to be here and I really thank you for joining in. So the way that I'm going to structure this webinar is that I'm going to start by a quick introduction about something about myself, and then I'll move on to talk about graphene ecosystem, its status, its intertwined nature, and also why we need a well-established, well-connected ecosystem that allows us to mobilize resources at times like this when we're dealing with a pandemic, when there's a need for quick evaluation and deployment of innovation. Then I would take that opportunity to actually introduce a new initiative that we started, the Advanced Material Pandemic Taskforce, its mission, and how we can use this to mobilize our ecosystem to provide solutions that will make a difference in the next 12 to 18 months post-pandemic. So a little bit about myself. Well, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut and Bill Gates. Well, I know that does sound funny, but I'm using that to just give you kind of a little bit of perspective about my passion, which is translating science into technology. Well, my background is in physics. I got my PhD at Vanderbilt University in ultrafast spectroscopy and femtosecond electron phonon dynamics and graphene. And when I was doing my postdoc, I started my first company. And it gave me such a unique perspective and understanding of what really goes into taking a technology from the lab into the market, and all just the complexity of it and the different components that are involved in this process. So through the work that I did with my company, I was asked to run the National Association for Graphene for North America. And that literally put me in a position, in a role that required understanding of all the different facets of the graphene ecosystem and work with all the different components to understand the intertwined relationship between all the different components. So I served as executive director for 3 years, and early this year, I resigned from my role because I wanted to launch a new venture, more of a global platform. So with a few of our partners, we created the C6 Advanced Material Firm, which is an implementation strategy firm focusing on architecting the global advanced material ecosystem, and I'll talk a little more about that. So let's talk about the E word. You will hear me talk about ecosystem so many times today. So the E word. When I was in academia and I was doing my PhD, well, the world of graphene to me was comprised of scientific labs, our collaborators, other scientists, and to a certain extent, government agencies that were giving us money to do the research. And perhaps to some extent, I would say it was the R&D work that we would be doing with the different companies. And that was really just the extent of it. That was my graphene world. That's what made my sphere in graphene. And then when I started my own company, I started seeing, oh, wow, there's a lot more to it. So I started seeing the different components coming to life. I started seeing interaction with more of the different neighborhoods, I call them, in the graphene ecosystem. I started seeing the connection with and interactions that I have to have with licensing, with IP law firms. And the first time that I sat behind a computer and I looked up at Google, buy graphene, because we needed to buy graphene. So I looked up buy graphene, and there were these 600, 700 companies that kept popping up. And they were, all of them were selling this black powder, and everybody's calling everything best graphene in the world. And I'm thinking, I come from the CVD background, so I'm thinking, what is that? I mean, graphene is one atomic layer of carbon. That is a powder. And then there was a moment that actually hit me, and I remember that. It was like thinking, wait a second, am I using the term wrong? Maybe what they're calling graphene is actually the right definition. Maybe my field is using it wrong. And as you can imagine, that was a moment that international standards kind of became a part of that world of having to explore that, having to understand it. And then as I ran the Graphene Association, it basically became my job to understand all the different components and all the intertwined relationship between all of these ones. I know there's going to be so many arrows, and that is what makes this intertwined complex network, which is our mighty graphene ecosystem. Many, many components involved. And the important thing is that this interconnected nature, it's very important. It's truly intertwined, and there's a balance. What that means is that when we're trying to solve problems, when we have a challenge in, I don't know, development, in making connections, let's say, to the government funding agency, etc., we should not be looking at this as an isolated problem, because it is not. We have to be looking at all of our problems that are our development, especially at this stage of development for graphene, the start of the core 3. We have to be starting to look at things through the framework of an ecosystem. But what does that mean? When I talk about ecosystem, I actually like to use the example that everybody's familiar with. I like to use the example of a natural ecosystem. And we have all heard those stories. And we all know that how changing one element in the ecosystem has this cascade effect, and which means that nothing can be solved in isolation. In our world, and my interaction with a lot of the folks in the graphene business, I see often startups that are going after funding, and this is just one example. See people that are going after VC money or angel money, and then they are not successful. And their solution to that is, okay, well, we have to go in with a stronger pitch. We have to go in with better forecasts. We have to make our proposal stronger. We're cheaper, we're better, we're more unique, we're the best in the world. And they knock on the doors and they still get the same results. Nothing. It doesn't work. And I tell them that perhaps the problem is not your pitch. The problem is that you are going after solutions thinking that you are this isolated bubble where only the investor and the startup exist. And that is not the case. There are so many other components of the ecosystem that results in that outcome that you are getting. And if you really want a true and stable solution, you have to go and you have to look at it from a holistic point of view and look at solutions that you can leverage so many parts of this ecosystem, build it, and then you will get different results. I like examples, so I'm going to give you a powerful example, and many of you, about the cascade effect, and many of you might have actually heard about this because it's a very popular example of the effect of that ecosystem can have on the different components. So decades ago, there was this problem in the Yellowstone National Park in the US. The river started eroding. The river was shallowing and thinning out. So they thought about a solution. They thought, okay, well, we need to keep a steady stream, so let's build physical barriers around it, use rocks, etc., to kind of maintain the stream. That makes sense, right? So maintain the stream. Except that wasn't a long-term solution. That was kind of a band-aid. They would have to go back and fix it and try to. It was a solution that required more work to actually maintain it. And then something else happened. They introduced a pack of wolves, which have been absent from the national park for decades. They introduced this pack of wolves, and the moment they do that, the wolves start hunting the elks. And the elks are the animals that were eating the trees. So when the elk population went down, the trees started growing back. When the trees started growing back, the beavers came back. When the beavers came back, they started building these dams in the river, holding the structure. As the trees grow, there were more animals, little animals like rabbits, like squirrels, and then there were more birds, and then there was bees, and then there were pollination that were happening. And throughout that, the vegetation and the soil started growing, and that solidified and that strengthened the soil and the banks around the river. So think about this. By introduction of a pack of wolves, they changed the physical structure of a river. That's as sophisticated as it gets through the cascade of the event. A sophisticated, holistic solution like this is not possible without an in-depth understanding of all the interconnected relationships of the cascade of an ecosystem. So next time you go to a conference, and I don't know when we're going to be going back to conferences, but next time that you are interacting or go to a conference and you think to yourself, you know what, I'm a theoretical physicist. What does the work package, Graphene Folk package in standards or in environmental health, what does that have to do with me? I cannot even envision a scenario where my work would be related to that. Remember this example. Remember that we are the intertwined nature of our relationship of different parts of the ecosystem means that if you have a bigger picture, if you have a better understanding of all the different components, you can leverage that. You can leverage that to come up with these sophisticated, creative solutions that are stable and that would not have been possible if you didn't have that understanding. So see yourself as an interconnected part of this ecosystem and try to understand it as well as you can. And you will hear me talk a lot about architecting the graphene ecosystem. That is the reason why we started C6 Advanced Material Firm. But what does that really mean? So I like analogies and mental pictures. And when I think about the graphene ecosystem, I actually envision this. I envision this city inside a globe with different neighborhoods, with roads and with buildings. And imagine this, when a material or a technology first starts, there are no buildings, it's basically barren land, it's bare land. And as it starts, as the few actors start popping up, a few initiatives, few development, few research areas, then people start building. But they start building whatever they want. There are no rules, there are no plans. So they start building whatever they want, whenever they want, wherever they want, to whatever spec they want. They just start building, no planning, no oversight, no building codes. And over time, this results in this disorganized hodgepodge of a city, which basically results in nothing but chaos. And one day, then you wake up and you say, you know what? We actually need to go from the neighborhood of scientific research to the neighborhood of regulatory compliance. It's unlikely. And then you realize, oh, wait, well, there are no roads. Oh, forgot to build roads. At that point, okay, say, all right, so we have to build a road. But imagine this, envision this. If I told you right now, you want to go from your house to, I don't know, your cousin's house right now, and you have to build a road. This city is already built. It's a chaotic city. And right now you have to make this road. You have to move components. You have to go around many components. You're going to have to spend a whole lot more energy. It will take a whole lot more time to actually achieve the same results and make that connection. And in this case, the metaphor is that these roads are pathways for collaboration and partnerships. Now, compare that to another scenario. Compare that to a scenario where from the very beginning, when inside that globe, the land is bare, and there are only a few actors in the field. You start by putting together a blueprint for the city. And a blueprint not just for the only like 10 actors that exist right now in that field, companies or I don't know, scientific labs, etc. You start putting together a blueprint for the needs of the field in the next few decades. You start building neighborhoods, you start building the perimeters of a neighborhood. You start putting them in your blueprint, neighborhoods for, I don't know, industry standards, for workforce development that you might not have a need for at that moment. It's too premature, but it is a component that needs to be taken into account and put into that blueprint. And as you start doing that, somebody has to have the job of building those roads, because the companies, the people inside, they're not going to be building the infrastructure of an ecosystem. Somebody needs to go in and build those roads. And as you build those roads in advance, at that point, as the city gets populated over time, and as people start building buildings, start companies, start new ventures, start new areas of research, then you're going to be building on a grid. And it's going to have access to all the roads and connections and all the different parts of the city. And that results in this organized, balanced ecosystem that thrives. So the point is that a well-connected, a well-established and well-architected and organized ecosystem allows us to not only grow and thrive exponentially, but that's the important part. It actually allows us to mobilize resources in our community at times like this when we are actually dealing with a global health crisis, where a swift action and coordination is needed for us to be able to deploy solutions and add value through our community, through our ecosystem. So that's the important thing when I keep talking about architecting the ecosystem. Somebody needs to come and do that job. And to a very big extent, that is what Flagship is doing for Europe. So that is a good place for me to actually connect this, mobilizing our resources and how much we need that, to this new philanthropic initiative that we started just a few weeks ago. It's been gaining so much traction. The Advanced Material Pandemic Task Force, or AMT. The inception point of AMT, or the task force, was 3 or 4 weeks ago, and with 4 countries coming to the table, US, UK, Spain, and Singapore taking the lead. And in such a short period of time, it has gained so much momentum, so much traction. And it truly is heartwarming to me, because it is indicative of this spirit of camaraderie, spirit of sharing, collaboration that I've started seeing take place around this time, these difficult times. People are truly, when we start talking to them, they start saying, how can we help? And we are going to be expanding AMT, the task force, to more countries, more organizations coming up in the next few weeks, so that we can involve anyone who actually wants to add value and is aligned with this cause. So what is this task? What are we trying to do? The task force is a global network, it's a global group coming together to use advances in material science for not only prevention and management of the global health crisis, but more importantly, for the needs, technological and societal needs of the post-pandemic world. The point for the task force was that it was supposed to be, and it is going to be filling this mission of crossing boundaries and borders, transcending politics, ideologies. And it was so important for us that this effort would not be led based on the national agenda or national interest of a country, or based on the financial benefit of this company or that company. It was truly all of us coming to the table saying, we are going to be sharing resources and knowledge and use advanced materials and graphene for the benefit of human beings and human life. How is the task force going to be accomplished in this week? The task force is in a position to establish a framework, to set strategies, and also coordinate. This is extremely important. We're seeing a vision and coordination that is missing, that requires swift action. So the task force is going to be doing this not only for the pandemic phase, but also for the post-pandemic phase. And we're doing that through the creation of a library of knowledge, an extensive mapping of needs, an expansive network of scientific labs, advanced material companies, testing facilities. And all those components involved is going to allow us to create a roadmap. Create a roadmap that tells us how advanced materials and graphene can be used as solutions in the different phase of the pandemic. And the hottest time, when there is going to be acceleration point of pandemic, when there's the recovery phase of the pandemic, and for the next one, preparation for the next pandemic, the next, I don't know, decade, whenever the next one is going to be. How can we structure something? How can we create that roadmap that allows us to see how our material can fill a solution and can fit into a solution? And how can we add value? So you might be actually thinking, well, how did the task force start? Well, trust me, none of us and none of the people on that steering committee, as you know, none of us were sitting around thinking, you know what, we don't have enough to do. We're just going to do this, I don't know, philosophical exercise, abstract exercise of let's put together a pandemic task force. Trust me, that was not it. And it truly started out of a need. We started seeing the need, and based on that, we said, okay, well, that is signaling the need for a coordination. And that is signaling all of us coming together and share all of our pain points and say, what can we do about it? And the result was this task force. So what is going to be done through the task force? One of the objectives of the task force is to create a library of knowledge related to advanced materials and pandemic, and COVID-19 in this case. And that also came from a need. So around the beginning of March, through C6, so we were active where we were working with clients, we were working with different people. We started seeing that graphene companies are coming to us, and they're talking about the challenges that they were having to find published results and published information and data relating to COVID for graphene, graphene oxide, reduced graphene oxide. And remember that these are actually companies with integrity. They're not just going to be putting graphene in whatever and they say, oh yes, it is going to be providing value. No, these were the companies with integrity that are thinking, you know what, we have a hypothesis, but we really need to test it. Where is that? Where can we find the data? And that's when we started seeing that there is this immense need for all of us to have access to this or create this database, which is not just the published results, because all of us know, and not just what is published and not just what is on archives. So we all know the ongoing work, that it's just the tip of the iceberg what is published. The ongoing work that is going on right now at such a rapid pace is happening. And if you don't know that group, if you don't know that scientific lab, you are not going to even know what they're working on. And at normal times, maybe that is okay because we have that luxury of waiting a few months or I don't know, half a year for that work to be published. But right now, we're in this crisis. The old models don't apply anymore. We need to know anything that is going on because the results that are coming from a lab and is in real time is being produced can influence and can actually direct the work of the development of a graphene-enabled or advanced material-related product that can be a solution for pandemics. So we started seeing the need for the task force to actually put together a library of knowledge, not just the scientific work and publications and also knowing what is being done, work under development, and having access to those labs, having had made those connections, but also a database of all the commercial advanced material enabled products and all the ongoing efforts, because at some points, whatever is publicly available and publicly can be shared, wanted to have a database of that so that we can look at our library of knowledge and say, this is the work that is being done, this is what we know, and these are the commercial products that are right now being developed. The other objective of the task force is to establish a global expansive network of resources and capabilities. And that also came from a need. We started seeing companies coming to us having trouble finding testing and certification labs for their COVID-related products. It was very early on. They were making these products, masks, filters, gloves, etc. And they were trying to find labs to test the efficacy of these products. Again, not just putting it on the market and saying, yeah, this works, let's just make a buck. No, they were trying to find labs that would actually test these. And the problem was that in the US at that time, and even right now, most of those government labs that are doing those kind of testings are shut down. And the other labs that are doing that kind of work are overwhelmed. So there was no way that they could actually make that connection and have those testing and certifications done. So we started going outside the US. We started going to different countries and trying to see, where are the resources? Who is open right now? Who is doing this? And then we said, oh, wait, we really do need a network of resources. That is so needed. So people don't have to come to us. Anybody, scientific labs that we're looking for collaborators in biology who are working with live virus, that the labs that we're actually looking for material, for graphene material, to do that, not on lab produced graphene or graphene nanoplatelets, but on whatever is industrially available right now, so that the results of the scientific work could be very well applied, very quickly applied to the development of a real product. So we started seeing that there is this need for the AMPed network, and I am very happy to announce that in the next probably 10 days or 2 weeks, we are going to be opening up the AMPed network to accept applications. So anyone, if any of you are involved in this area, I encourage you strongly to submit an application and become a part of this network, as a result of that, have access to all the different needs that you might have. And that's related to the pandemic and this crisis that we're in right now. And then there is another goal for the task force, and the task that this was a need to develop a map of needs. And developing a heat map for the innovation needs of, again, not just the pandemic phase, is so important. For the technological and societal needs of the next 12 to 18 months, there is a future ahead of us, and it's going to have its own needs. We have to understand what those needs are. And this also came from a need. So by the end of March, it was around March, we started noticing that almost everyone who's contacting us is working on putting graphene in a mask, ventilator, or some sort of PPE or coating. I'm not kidding. From the companies to scientific labs, everyone that we see is trying to goes through those few different products. And it is a problem, but it's because everybody's trying to help. We see on TV that there is this shortage of PPE and masks, and we're sitting at home feeling helpless. We're thinking, you know what, maybe my research, maybe our product can actually help. And that's what results in 70% of us. We actually did a survey. 70% of people are actually working on masks right now. And that's a problem. First of all, those of us who are in the commercialization field know that the time to market for any advanced material related product is longer than the pandemic phase that requires urgent supply of something like PPE. And secondly, any nanomaterial enabled product that needs to go through this safety evaluation, especially if you're putting a nanoparticle like graphene nanoplatelets in a mask, which is not a normal environment. It's not a dry environment. After a while, when you're breathing through that, that thing becomes wet. Now you are dealing with a completely different environment. And it is in the process for the health and safety evaluation of this is absolutely not trivial, and it's not fast. Just ask Alberto from the work package, EHS work package and flagship. And thirdly, And this is one of the most important ones. So we're revolving these mask ideas and everything, and everybody's working on, oh, how do we do this? How do we make it antiviral, et cetera, et cetera. So we go to the clinicians, we go to the nurses, and we ask them, oh, well, you know what, we're making these antiviral or better masks for you. And then they told us, guys, we don't need better masks. The masks we had were wonderful. Our problem is not that we need better masks. We don't have masks, period. What we need right now is that our goggles are fogging. We can't see through our goggles, and there's nothing we can do about that. Can your material solve that? And we're thinking, well, actually, yes, it can. And this is an important point. Not only we have to understand the different phases of a pandemic to be able to look at what are the needs, but also we have to go to the innovation consumers. We are innovation providers. We're guessing what people are going to be needing. We have to go to those people who are actually innovation consumers that are going to be telling us what is their need, and we are going to be able to look at it and say, what are the needs in the different parts and different phases of this pandemic, so that we can coordinate, we can act swiftly, and not all of us start working on masks. But for that, we need to first understand the pandemic phases. So this is the CDC intervals. And what is relevant to us right now is the pandemic intervals. If you look at the pandemic intervals that we're looking at, there's an acceleration phase that in the case of COVID-19, we're seeing that it's around 2 to 3 months. And this phase is characterized by scarcity of supply. And this is what we're seeing, chaos. We're seeing people responding. Our community is responding to the needs of those 2 to 3 months. While the production for the response time or for the time to market for these applications that some of us are putting together are going to be much longer than the duration of this interval of the pandemic. And what we're missing is that there is a deceleration phase in front of us. There is a whole new future in front of us where our lives are going to be different. And that's the duration, 12 to 18 months, if we have a vaccine, if we have a solution. Throughout this phase, our behaviors are going to be changing. There's going to be requirements from, perhaps some regulations or some mandates from the government for safety of workplace that needs to be put into place. Think of the need that we have to go back to work. We have to start our lives. This virus is not going anywhere. So we have to make changes, and those changes are going to come in many different waves. They're going to come in many different forms, in many different industries, and they are not related to PPE. The majority of these changes are going to be a lot broader than just the medical needs or diagnostic needs. But we cannot expect companies, we cannot expect scientific labs to do this job of forecasting, outreach, this expansive outreach to the end users, to understand, to the government, to say, what are the needs of you guys opening the economy? And we are doing that right now with the task force. We're reaching out to retailers and we're asking them, what are your problems? Do you guys need antiviral coatings? And they tell us, no, we don't, but we have a more immediate problem. Our points of sale systems are failing. We have 400% more transactional fail because we're cleaning the system so much with alcohol. Where you swipe your card, we're cleaning it so much with alcohol, it is failing. We don't know what to do. Do you guys have a solution for that? And that's just one example of the needs that is going to be in front of us for this new future, where our change in either human behavior, the change in consumer habits, the change that is that's implemented because there is going to be requirements for safety of workers and for customers. It's going to bring about a whole new wave of innovation needs that we need to actually try to start mapping out. And that is the job of a task force. That is what the task force needs to do to be able to help the entire industry. And the concept of that and the CC group started thinking through the concept of the future of. So we start thinking about the future of the post-pandemic future of the workplace. We are not going to be going to work and swiping badges anymore. That's going to go away. We are going to be probably getting rid of pens and papers in the next 12 to 18 months. Our behaviors are going to change. What is going to be replacing that? We're talking to people, we're talking to big companies that are opening up, and the ones with cubicles. They're talking about putting dividers, plexiglass between people. But think about this. And we think, well, what does that have to do with graphene? Think about this. Plexiglass, this material is not meant for 100 times cleaning a day with alcohol. After a while, we're even seeing the ones that are using it right now, it starts fading, it starts scratching up, and it becomes even more porous, which is a problem. How about a coating, not for antiviral, but for protection of those surfaces? And those are going to be the kind of needs that we have to go and understand beforehand so that we can act swiftly. The future of air travel is going to be different. The future of manufacturing, shopping, retail, hospitals, schools, all of these different things, and this is just a handful of examples. The future of conferences are going to be different. Think of this. Next time we go to a conference, we're not going to be shaking hands. And with that becomes, we are not going to be exchanging business cards. So how about a solution to that? We have to start thinking much, much broader than just the medical needs. And that is what the task force objective is to accomplish. So with that, when we have developed these different components, the library of knowledge, the map of needs, the AMP network, that feeds into a vision that allows us to see an overview of the landscape, which then allows us to devise a strategic roadmap. And that is the ultimate goal, to come up with a strategic roadmap. And in the next phase of the AMP network and AMP initiative, with coordination and injection of funds, we can actually execute that roadmap and accomplish the goal that we set for ourselves, which is to evaluate and use advanced materials in graphene to help the pandemic and post-pandemic needs of the world. And I know that's a mighty, mighty mission, right? But I'm seeing the spirit of camaraderie, and I've seen the spirit in all of us that together we can actually, I am certain that we can do this. And with that, I would like to conclude. These are truly unprecedented and difficult times. We could not have imagined this a few months ago. And as citizens of this world, we are facing a crisis, all of us together. It is our responsibility as human beings to act. We might not be nurses, we might not be doctors at the front line, but we are scientists, we are engineers, we're material folks, and we are not going to be sitting by the sidelines. We are going to be there to help and do our part. And perhaps with that, we can also look at this silver lining. I know as the graphene community, and it's definitely my experience, is that one of the barriers that we face is that we go to people and we try to say, okay, this is how graphene or advanced materials can help innovate, etc. And the response that we get a lot of times, or the implied response is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, it's broke now. Can we fix it? And while we're at it to fixing it, can we evaluate if our material, or if our advanced materials and graphene can actually be a part of this solution and can actually help? This is really, truly, I see this, a silver lining in this is that I truly see this as a prime time for us for innovation. And again, this is not just in the biology field. This is not just the needs of medical supplies or diagnostics. This is a lot broader. This is an opportunity for us to coordinate and use this to evaluate how our materials can be a part of the solution and the new future, and do that with integrity and with urgency and taking swift action. So let's join forces, and I am sure that together we can make a difference, and we can use our knowledge and we can use our resources to actually help the world. Thank you. Alexandra, I don't know if you're going to be reading questions, or if there are any questions, I will be more than happy to answer.
Sorry, I was still muted. Yes, the needs and the problems of modern software needs to be solved as well. Thank you very much, Zina, for this webinar. It was very inspiring. Now, if anyone has a question, I'm gonna unmute all of the participants, but please, you need to unmute yourself additionally if you would like to ask a question in voice. We have some questions already in writing, so I'm gonna go through them first, and then if you still have more questions, I'll be happy to hear them. So first question to you, Zina, is from Stefan Roche. What is the role of the steering committee of AMPT, and which type of professional relation do they all have with C6 Advanced Materials?
That's a great question. So the steering committee at this point is truly those world leaders and visionaries that are coming together, and they do have the same pain points. They see the same need that exists, and they do not have any relationship directly to C6. C6, like any of these other organizations, we're all donating our time. This is a philanthropic mission. This is not for the interests of one organization versus the other. We're all bringing our resources to the table. We're donating our time, our resources to build this thing together. So there is no direct relationship between these folks. I am on the steering committee, and John Hoffman, who is represented also from GSMA and also C6, he is on the committee, but the rest of those folks, you recognize their pictures, they are from different organizations. And the role of the steering committee is truly to provide direction and strategies. And then we are creating different committees as well. We have an executive committee, we have technical committees, and then we have working groups that are involved in, let's say, immediate needs of the or immediate solutions. And then there are folks that are involved in developing the workforce for the applications that are going to be coming in the second wave of this pandemic. So there is, if anybody amongst you is involved and is actively involved, I would definitely want to talk to you. Please reach out to me. I'm accessible on LinkedIn, with email, and I would like to discuss how we can actually involve you in this task force, and not just through the AMPT network, which is open to anybody who can actually apply and can be accepted, but in more of the organizational role and in the thought leadership that is going to be required.
Okay, thank you. So next question from Jon Wingberg. What is the easiest way for other partners to join the forces? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Definitely. So as I mentioned, there are two different ways of joining the task force. The first one is that we have made this available to apply to the network and become a part of this network, which means that you have access to all the information that's being developed. And again, philanthropic mission. This is for our job is to provide the vision and strategy and provide a roadmap so people can say, oh, well, so there is a need in 3 months for this application. Our company can start working on that. So that is open to anybody who can actually make it clear to us that they have something related. Obviously, we do not want the AMP network to be including people who might not necessarily have any bearing or have any relationship or connection to this cause. So I encourage everybody, in the next 10 to 14 days, we're going to be opening up this application process to everyone, individuals and organizations. But at the same time, there is a higher level of collaboration and partnership that can take place. And that is, if you really are one of the leaders, and if you are heavily involved in this area, and you think you have the thought leadership that we need, and you have the resources, and you can actually spend the time and energy to do this, and this is a cause that is close to your heart, contact me. We are talking to people, again, as I mentioned, in the context, in the box of the leadership and hierarchy of the task force committees. So we would like to talk to you, and we would like to see how we can partner and how we can use your resources and your expertise in that area. So two different ways of interaction. One is available to everybody, and the other one is through one-on-one interaction for us to figure out how we can actually work together to build this.
Okay, so a question from Simon Ligi. Is the AMPT already... Oh, I'm hearing someone trying to ask a question, I think. I'm sorry, but there's a lot of background noises and we can't really understand what you are saying. Okay, maybe I'll just read the question. So the question from Simon Leegi, is the AMP already full organized with tag dissemination, etc.?
No, this is the inception point of this effort was only a few weeks ago, and the fact that we have this global kind of support all of us coming together has been really heartwarming. But at the same time, the job of the steering committee, and we're going to be having our second steering committee meeting on Monday, is going to be how do we develop this further. So if you want to get involved, this is a prime time. Please contact me and let us talk, because it is not absolutely not fully formed. It is a work that we are going to be doing over the next few months to actually get to the point of being able to position ourselves to develop that roadmap.
Okay, thank you. So I actually have one question personally about the first part of your webinar, the ecosystem and of the graphene, and in general the ecosystem of innovation, because I have a feeling that what you described could be really translated to other technical or research areas. So I mostly deal with researchers and sometimes even young students, and they do have this feeling that they want to be connected to this bigger picture, but they don't know how to get connected to the ecosystem, to how to understand it. Do you have maybe some advice for them?
That is such a great question, Alexandra. And yes, I do have an advice. Get yourself involved in anything that you can. So when I started my company, like I told you, when I came out of academia, I didn't even know that international standards were a part of anything. It just didn't even make sense to me. I always thought when I was academia, who are these people sitting around spending this amount of time just kind of going about what do we call this and what we call that? That sounds useless. That sounds like a waste of time. I didn't even know that there was a need for this. How did I get connected to that ecosystem? There was one meeting in DC, and I didn't even know what my role would be. I was just available. So I went and I attended that. And I sat in this meeting not understanding a single word that was being talked about. But I started picking up different things through with seeing the different relationships, kind of picking up concepts here and there. And that made sense to me. And then I started seeing the bigger picture. And through that follow-up, I started seeing more. And then I was asked to get involved. And then that's how it developed. It truly is inserting yourself in things, going to conferences and going to the meetings of this work package or that work package, and trying to see what is it about. And yes, you're not going to understand anything about it in the beginning, but you will pick up a feel. You will pick up something. You will see a point, and then there are going to be many people who can help you, can explain to you. When I first started understanding regulatory and authorization, etc., I needed so much help. I can still not wrap my head around it. But people helped me along the line. They started telling me, giving me pieces. And as they gave me pieces and I asked them, I sometimes said, I'm asking stupid questions, I started seeing the picture. So my advice is get involved, talk to people. If you see, I don't know, there is a webinar on or a conference on regulatory compliance, you think, what is that? Go and attend. Stay there and just listen for a few minutes, see if you pick something up. You have to insert yourself to be able to see the bigger picture. And also as organizers, Alexandra, Flagship, C6, the National Graphene Association, when I was involved, it is our job to give that holistic picture to people. So part of that is on us to be able to provide that. To a great extent, Flagship is doing that with organization of the different work packages and kind of facilitating the interaction between them.
Okay, thank you very much. One last question, also from Jon. Is there any specific homepage for the AMPT?
Yes, it's ampednetwork.com, and the information on that, again, this is an inception point. There is not much, but we are going to be uploading a lot more information and the structure and also the committees that are involved, hopefully by Monday.
Okay, great. Maybe you would agree to communicate this homepage within the presentation later on.
Definitely, that's a great idea.
Okay. Well, I think that's all for today. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating. I hope to see you again. Again, I remind you all that the recording of the webinar will be available on the educational platform. You can also view the past webinars over there. And I wish you all a healthy life in the strange times, and have a good day. And thank you again, Zina.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alexandra, and thank you, Flagship.